All right, welcome back here to turn 2 of this Pataliputra scenario. We're going to start with that lowest initiative rated leader, so back to that 2 initiative tribal chief here on the Morian left. And last time we had to leave this unit behind, so we're just going to get it moved up next to the chief here, and not going to be too aggressive with these units. Again, no missiles and just 4 troop quality. Now they are exempt from the Dharma Yuddha pledge, so we could push them forward and maybe attack this unit here, but again, no missiles, and so I think I'd rather just hang back here and wait for an opportunity to attack a flank or find a unit that's close to breaking to attack. So we're just going to have this guy move here, and then we'll flip them to moved, and we'll flip the leader to finished. Again, no momentum for these tribal chief, and that'll do it. All right, so we have level 3 leaders on both sides again, but I went ahead and rolled the dice offline here, and the Nandins have won that roll, so the Nandins will choose first, and they're going to activate Chandragupta again, the Nandin prince here, right here in the middle, and this is the result of the roll there. So 5 for the Nandas, 1 for the Morians. And the first thing we'll do is reveal that Dharma Yuddha pledge. We're about to break it here with the Nandas. We're going to say that they are not thrilled about this rash rebel attack by the Morians, so they want to suppress this quickly. And lots of opportunity for some shock attacks here. And Chandragupta again in a position to issue those wing commands to both Nayaka and himself, but this time not able to give those wing commands for free. So, and he's also not in the range of his overall commander, so he'll have to roll his strategy rating or less to activate more than 1 Nayaka. But the first one is free. So he'll start with this left wing Nayaka commander. All right, so here we are on the left with this Nayaka chariot commander, and we know the combined lines must stay together, and so they're all going to be able to move just 2 hexes here because they are going to engage in some shock combat with these guys. So we'll get these rightmost units moving first. Heavy chariot unit here, we'll just move them forward 2 spaces. We'll just get this Nayaka flipped here, and we'll have them fire. They're a mounted archer unit at a range of 2 hexes that move, so they need a 2 or less. We're going to fire at this javelin unit here. I'm just going to roll the dice off camera here, and we get an 8 there, so that's a miss. Javelin can't return fire. We have this heavy chariot move, and same deal. We'll have them fire at this javelin, needing the 2 or less there. Gets a 5, another miss. They had a hit from last turn. Can't fire, no one in range there. Now we'll be moving into the zones of control of these units to engage in shock combat. We've declared that we're breaking that Dharma Yuddha pledge, so we don't have to spend the extra cost to move into the Zok, but we will have to take some reaction fire here. So we'll start with this Mala chariot unit here, and we're just going to have to move right into this position. And first thing that happens here is I have to take reaction fire from this archer. So a foot archer at a range of 1 hex didn't move here, needs a 5 or less, and they get a 9 there. So that's going to be a missile low. So now the chariot can fire, mounted archer at a range of 1 hex, who moved, needs a 4 or less, and they get a 4, so that's a hit. The other thing we have to do here is we have to put this marker down. Some unit types, you get a choice. You can decide if you want to engage, but for this unit, we have to engage. And in fact, for all of these units here, I'm going to decide to just engage in shock combat. So next up is this longbow unit. Now this unit we know can't move and fire, but unfortunately as part of the combined line, they have to move too. So they'll be moving into some reaction fire, but being unable to fire. So first they'll take reaction fire from this archer, 5 or less here, gets an 8, so that's a miss. Now reaction fire from the javelin. Javelin needs a 5 or less, gets a 7. So for javelin units rolling a 7, not only a miss, but a missile low. So these guys not really hitting the mark here. Okay, next up will be this chariot unit here, and they'll move into position. And again, going to have to take reaction fire from the javelin, and then the archer. We'll start with the javelin first, 5 or less. They get a 9, so missed, and also that was their final shot there. So they're now out of missiles. Now the archer will fire 5 or less, and they get a 4, so that is a hit. Now the chariot's going to fire at this unit because there's a leader stack. Moving mounted archer there needs a 4 or less, and they get a 6, so that's a miss. Next up, this javelin unit will move up. Going to have to take reaction fire from both archers here. So first the guild archer, 5 or less, gets a 7, so that's a miss. Tribal archer gets a 2, and that's a hit. Javelin will fire at this guild archer with the leader. They need a 5 or less. They get a 2, so that is a hit. Again, the foot javelin don't apply that movement DRM, so that's why they got to roll 5 or less. But this guy takes a hit. If they would have rolled a 0, that would have been check for a leader casualty, but they just rolled that 2, so just 1 hit there. Next up, the chariot unit here, and again, reaction fire from both of these archers. First one with the leader, 5 or less. You get a 1, that's a hit. Next one, they get a 6, that's a miss. So 1 hit on this chariot. Chariot will fire at the unit with the leader. Mounted archer that moved needs a 4 or less, and they get a 9. So that's going to be a missile low here. Going to get this guy moved up, and again, this longbow here, unable to move and fire, so they're just going to have to take reaction fire from the archer there, a 5 or less. You get a 2, so that's a hit. And this guy, and we're going to actually have them fire at this elephant unit here. So mounted archer at a range of 2 hexes is 3 or less, but they move, so 2 or less, and they get a 2. So that's, again, 2 hits on those elephants when they take missile fire. And again, we should have been laying these markers down for each unit, but we're going to have all of them engage in shock combat here. So I'm just going to lay this marker down to show that all of these units are indeed engaging in shock combat here. So let's get these markers cleaned up. And notice I also put the moved marker here. All of these units have moved. But before we get into shock combat here, we actually have to complete the line commands for the other Nayaka leaders under Chandramas. All of those line commands need to be completed first, and then we swing back and do shock combat. Okay, so now these wing commands will require that we roll a 4 or less for each of these Nayaka leaders here. So we'll start with Chandramas. He gets a 7 here, so he will not be able to activate. That is one of the risks here of those wing commands. When you fail that wing command roll, that strategy rating roll, that Nayaka is automatically finished. So Chandramas, acting as a Nayaka, finished in that capacity, but still active as a wing commander here. But we can try for our right wing Nayaka here. And they get a 2 here, so they will be able to activate. So we'll scan over to the right wing here and get that line command going. Okay, right wing chariot Nayaka here. So we're going to move to engage in shock combat with these units here. So we'll just be moving 2 hexes with this line. So we'll start over here on the left, this chariot unit here. Just move them 2 hexes. And they can fire. So they'll fire at this javelin unit straight ahead there. So mounted archer, range of 2 hexes that move, needs a 2 or less. And they get a 2, so that's a hit. Just going to make sure to lay this moved marker down there. So this whole line moving. Okay, next up, we've got this unit here with the Nayaka, another heavy chariot, going to move right on up and going to fire at that same javelin unit there. Again, 2 or less. And we get a 5 there. So that's a miss. Move the javelin up. They can't fire. We'll move the standard chariot up, the archer. We'll have them fire at this javelin unit on the end here. So again, 2 or less. And they get a 9. So it's a missile low. Okay, going to have this longbow move up here. Longbow can't move and fire. So we'll move this chariot up. And this chariot can fire at this archer. Again, another 2 or less. And we get another 9 here. So missile low. No return fire, we're saying, from this archer, because that goes down the hex spine and their range only extends through their front 2 hexes. Rules say line of sight, at least, should be interpreted strictly. So we're going to say that is not valid for this archer to fire down that hex spine. Could be wrong there, so definitely let me know. Now we'll be moving into zones of control here. So we'll start with this javelin unit. We're going to have to take some reaction fire from the archer there. So foot archer, range of 1 hex, 5 or less. Gets a 3, that's a hit. And now the jav will fire back. Javelin again, 5 or less here. They do not apply the movement DRM. Gets a 4, that's a hit. And again, for each of these units moving into that zone of control, I need to put this marker down. In the case of this light infantry here, I would get to decide if they shock attack or not. I am saying they will. For some units, they must. So we'll again say this marker applies to all the units. We're going to have them all shock attack here. So next up, this chariot. I'm going to take reaction fire from the archer first, 5 or less. Get a 5, that's a hit. Javelin next, 5 or less. Get a 0, so 2 hits. Looking pretty shaky for this chariot here. Now he gets to fire. We'll have him fire at the archer, 4 or less. Gets a 1, another hit. Okay, we'll have this longbow move up. Again, can't fire, but going to take reaction fire. We'll do javelin first, 5 or less. Gets a 4, that's a hit. And then we'll do archer. That's a 7, that's a miss. So 1 hit, chariot up. Reaction fire, so archer first. That's a 6, so miss. And then the javelin, 5 or less. They get a 9, so missile low. Chariot will fire at the unit with the leader there, 4 or less. And they get a 9, so missile low here. Okay, let's get these markers cleaned up. Okay, so that's how we're looking. Now we're going to move into the shock segment for both the left and right Nayaka here. And we'll take a look at the shock procedure. Okay, so we'll just scan through this overview of the shock combat resolution procedure. Step 1 is the charge. So we'll need to roll and do a TQ check for all the units who are going to be involved to see if they will attack in an ordered manner, or basically to test their courage here once they're up close and personal with the enemy. Then we check for casualties of any leaders that are involved. Then we resolve the shock using the charts and tables. And then finally check for collapses where you see who routed. There's also a couple other steps that are not mentioned here, but all javelin units involved in shock have to go to missile no, so have to remember to do that. And we have chariots involved in this combat, and there is a chariot pass-through rule, so we'll have to take a look at that as well. But let's swing back to the map here. Okay, we're going to start over here on the right, and one thing we didn't mention was the pre-shock procedure, where you identify which unit will attack which defender. And so in this case, it's pretty simple. We've got 4 attacking units and 4 defending units, so it'll just be one-on-one attacks here. On the left side, we'll see we have to identify 1 2-on-1 attack, but we'll get there in a minute. So we'll move into this shock resolution procedure. Each one of these shock resolution steps needs to take place for all units before you move to the next step, so we'll do that as well. So starting here with the charge step, I'm going to roll a set of D10s here. I've got a few of them, and I'll just line them up next to the units. Okay, so these are the pre-shock rolls. So each one of these applies to each one of these defending guild units. And then these apply to the light infantry. The chariots are not required to make this pre-shock check, attacking chariots with this must shock marker. So what we do here is we just compare the die roll to the unit's troop quality. If it's higher, we apply the difference in hits. So in these three cases, the die roll is lower or equal to the troop quality. So no hits, but you can see here a 9 was rolled. So we're going to have to apply the difference there, 9 minus 4, 5 hits being applied to this unit. So for now, I'm just going to put this 5 there. I know that's obviously 7, but we're just going to put that there for now. Now I'm just putting all these dice out for the camera here. Normally I would roll one at a time and do each pairing, but it's just easier to put these dice out here. So this unit, 6 is 1 higher than 5, so we have to add 1 hit here. This light inf, no hits. So normally in shock, you would wait until a later step to rout the units if they exceed their troop quality. But in this case, right here in line during this step, we have to rout this unit because they've exceeded their troop quality. So we'll do that now. I'll get these dice out of the way. Okay, so we'll get this unit routed here. So we'll just turn them around and move them 2 spaces toward the retreat edge. And the attacking unit advances into the vacated hex. They can also change facing 1 vertex here, but we're not going to bother with that here. The other thing we'll do before we forget is all javelin units involved in shock combat are immediately missile no. Let's mark this javelin as missile no. We'll flip this one over to missile no. All right, so now before we move to the next step of shock combat, which is check for leader casualties, we actually have to complete this pre-shock check over on the left side. So we're going to move over there now. And one quick note here, I actually made a mistake earlier and I did not flip these 2 units to missile no. So I've just done that. Back to that pre-shock procedure, I need to identify which of these attacks will be a 2-on-1 attack. And for that, I'm going to use this marker that obviously didn't come in the box. It's just this tile spacer, but I'm going to put that here to represent a 2-on-1 attack against this unit with the guild chief. And now we're just going to roll a handful of dice and get them placed out for that same pre-shock charge step. Okay, so that's all the dice I have. I'll need to get 1 rolled here for this guy, but we can see already that these are some pretty good rolls here, some pretty courageous units on this left flank. So no hit's going to be applied here on the Morian side. All of those rolls are TQ or lower. And then on the Nondan side, same deal. So again, those chariots do not do this check, but this light inf, no hits, and then this light inf, no hits. So I'll roll 1 more for this guy here. All right, they get a 7, so they will have to take 2 hits. Okay, let's get these dice moved out of the way. Okay, now we're going to mark all those javelin units as missile no. And this guy's already missile no. So, okay, now we'll move on to the next step, which is checking for leader casualties. And on this side, we've got the tribal chief and the guild chief. So we're going to roll 1 die each. And if it's a 0, they're wounded. If it's higher than a 0, no issue. And if they're wounded, we roll again. And if it's higher than their initiative rating, then they're actually killed. We'll do that first roll. Okay, we get a 9 and a 7 there, so no issue. So we'll move back over to the right side. There is a guild chief on that side. Okay, checking leader casualty for this guild chief here. And we get a 5 there, so no issue. Okay, so now we'll move on to the resolve the shock step. Okay, so on to the resolve the shock step here, and we're going to go through each set of attackers and defenders one at a time. I'm going to use this marker. It doesn't come in the box, but I'm going to use this to kind of iterate through each pairing. So starting here on the right and moving left, we've got a chariot attacking a light infantry. So the first resolve the shock sub-step there is to use this Clash of Spears and Swords chart to determine what column on the shock CRT to use. So I'm going to bring this into view here. This is a frontal attack. And so it's a chariot unit attacking a light infantry unit. So that's going to be a 9 base column on the shock CRT. Okay, next step, determine weapon and position superiority. Position superiority is pretty straightforward. If you're attacking from the flank or rear, you get that superiority. Otherwise, you do not. Weapon superiority, you have to check this chart here. I'll bring this into view again. So we see here a chariot unit is the attacking type, and light inf is the defending type. And so the line there just means no superiority. There's AS, which is attack superior, where you would double the defender's hits. And then DS is defender superior, where you would triple the attacker's cohesion hits. So good thing to pay attention to there. And in this case, no superiority. Okay, next step is to determine the size ratio difference. In this case, we have a chariot versus a non-chariot, and there's a note here that says we do not apply the size ratio difference for that case. Okay, and next step here is to determine terrain or leader effects on combat. In this case, just clear terrain and no leaders involved, so we'll move on. And finally, we roll on the shock CRT. So bring this table into view here one last time. And remember from our first step there, we determined we're on column 9. And so we'll roll a die and then arrive at one of these numbers where the left number is the number of hits on the attacker, and then the right number in parentheses, the number of hits in the defender. Some other DRMs there. None of those apply here. Okay, so roll in on the 9 column, and we get an 8 there. That's going to be a 2, 3. So 2 hits on the attacker, 3 hits on the defender. Okay, then we'll move on to this final sub-step here, push of shields, breakthrough. So here we check to see if any unit has accumulated 3 or more times cohesion hits than any individual enemy unit. And if they have, they take 2 additional hits. So for example, if this chariot had just 1 hit, then the light imp would have 3 times as many as the chariot and would need to take 2 additional hits. Doesn't apply here. Okay, so now we'll move on to the next pairing here. And so again, we're going through each of these shock steps for each unit before we then move on to the next step. So had one of these units accumulated enough cohesion to rout, we would not actually do the rout yet. Okay, so we have light imp on light imp. So our base CRT column here will be a 7. There's no position or weapon superiority, but there is a size ratio difference. The size here being the yellow number in the red box there. You can see that's a 4 for this light imp, and it's a 5. So we have to create a ratio out of that. And the rule there is you round in favor of the attacker if they moved. Otherwise, you round in favor of the defender. And in this case, the attacker did move. So we would have to round that ratio up to basically a 5 to 5, right? So it's a 1 to 1. So no column shift there. Okay, no terrain adjustments here, but we do have a leader, this guild chief, and they'll be contributing their charisma to this roll here. In this case, he's stacked with the defending unit, so we'll be subtracting his charisma value from the rolls. So we'll roll on that 7 column again, and we get a 2, but again, subtracting 2 from that means we're at 0 here on the 7 column. That's going to give the attacker 3 hits and the defender 2 hits. Okay, now we check that push of shields breakthrough again. No units with 3 times the hits of an enemy unit. So we'll move on. And again, this unit does have enough to rout, but like we said earlier, we're not doing that rout step yet. So we'll move on to this chariot versus light imp. Saw this one earlier. That's on column 9 there. We know there's no superiority for weapon or position. We know we do not apply the size ratio difference for chariot versus non-chariot. No terrain or leaders. So we'll just be rolling on that 9 column. And we get another 0 here. So 3 more hits on the attacker, 2 hits on the defender. Okay, push of shields breakthrough. We do see that this unit has 3 times the hits of an individual enemy. They have 6 to their 2, so they have to add 2 additional hits here. Okay, now we're going to move over to the left side and continue with this same step in the shock sequence. Okay, we'll continue right to left here. We'll start with this chariot versus light imp. Okay, and we've done this combo a couple times now, so that's going to be on the 9 column. No weapon or position superiority. Do not apply the size ratio difference. No terrain or leader effects. So we'll just roll on the 9 column. And we get a 2 here, so that is going to be 2 hits each. Okay, moving on to light imp versus light imp. So we know we're on the 7 column. No weapon or position superiority here. Size ratio difference. We saw this on the other side, so 4 to 5. But since this guy moved, we round in his favor. So 1 to 1, no column shifts there. No terrain or leaders, rolling on the 7 column. And we get a 3 here, so that is 2 hits each. Okay, and the push of shields here, which I also didn't do on the last pairing here, but no one here having 3 times the hits as an enemy unit, so we'll move on. Okay, so here we have a 2-on-1, and we have to pick which of these units we're going to use for determining our base column and our angle of attack. And we're going to pick the chariot here. That's a better type matchup versus the light infantry than the light imp, which would be a 7 base column, and the chariot we know is the 9 base column. So start with the 9 base column there. No weapon or position superiority here. We do not apply that size ratio difference. Again, chariot versus a non-chariot here. No terrain effects, but we do have this leader here with a charisma of 1. So we'll be subtracting 1 from the die roll. Okay, so rolling on the 9 column here, and we get a 3 and have to subtract 1 down to a 2. So 2 hits each. So when you have more than one attacker here, you distribute the hits evenly between them, with the extra going to the unit that was used in determining base column. So in this case, both of these will move from 1 to 2 hits. Okay, push of shields, no one 3 times higher than an enemy, so we move on. Another chariot versus light imp, we know that's a 9 base column, no weapon or position superiority. Size ratio doesn't apply. We do have a leader here. So again, leader stacked with the defender, charisma of 2, subtracting that from the die roll on the 9 column. And we get a 0 again. Not the greatest rolls here for the attackers. So can't go any lower than 0. So on the 9 column, 3 hits on the attacker, 2 hits on the defender. Okay, nothing to do with the push of shields. So we'll move on to our final pairing here. Light imp on light imp. We know that's on the 7 column. No weapon or position superiority. But we do have a size modifier to make here. So size 4 to size 2 here are going to be a 2-to-1 ratio, meaning we get to shift one column to the right in favor of the attacker here. So starting on the 7 base column, we go to the 8 column and get another 3 here. Okay, 2 hits each. We're on to the final step in the shock procedure here. That's the check for collapse step. And what we do there is any units that have cohesion hits equal to or greater than their troop quality will immediately rout. And then units that are within 1 of routing but are still in an enemy's OC will roll a die to see if they actually rout or stand. And attacking units will advance after combat. And so we'll go through that now. We'll actually just go left to right this time. We've got the light imp here who has accumulated enough hits to rout, so they will rout. The defending unit, of course, does not advance after combat. Okay, moving to this unit, we don't have anyone who's routing, but we do have one unit who is within 1 of breaking. So we'll roll a die for this unit. The die roll is less than their troop quality of 5. Then they would reduce that 4 hits to 3 hits, and they would stand. If it's higher, then they will break. But the rules are a little unclear. The charts actually say if the die roll is less than or equal to, but the written rules say less than. Assume equal to means you break there. So I will just go with the written rules here. And we get a 6 here, so higher than 5, this guy's going to break. So chariots don't actually rout, they're just immediately eliminated. So we have our first rout points on the board here. Okay, moving on to this 2-on-1 here, we can see that these units are fine. This unit, though, is within 1 of breaking, so they have to roll a die here. And they get a 0, so they will stand, and this 3 turns into a 2. Okay, we can see both of these units are fine, so we'll move on. And then another case where a unit is 1 away from breaking and still in an enemy's OC, so they have to make that roll. And they get a 6, so they break. And now this chariot must advance into the vacated hex. So they will do so. They can also change facing 1 vertex, but again, not going to do that here. And we'll move back over to the right side. Okay, starting over here, we can clearly see this chariot will break here. Again, chariots do not rout, so they're just eliminated. So that's more rout points for the Morians. And again, defenders do not advance, so we'll move on to the next one. And another Nanda routing here. So this guy will turn around and rout. And on to the final pairing here, and we can see that this unit is 1 away from breaking, so they'll do the die roll, and they get an 8, so they break. And the chariot has to advance here. Okay, so that completes the shock procedure, but there is one more step we have to do here, which is this chariot pass-through. So let's see who is eligible for the chariot pass-through. So no units on the right here. This chariot would have been, but they've just advanced after combat. And here we see there is a chariot with a defending unit still in place here. So we'll need to pick this chariot up and move them into one of these rear hexes. So we'll do that. Okay, so we've got them moved into a rear hex of the defending unit there. And that's going to complete the shock segment here. So I'm going to get these markers cleaned up and we'll be back in a sec. Okay, so this is how things are looking. And Chandragupta is actually going to try and roll for momentum here to see if he can get a couple of his elephant units pushed into the center there. The opposing leaders could attempt to trump, but they're not going to bother. Chandragupta has a pretty low initiative here. Now, the risk, of course, being the die roll of doom. If you roll a 9 and he gets a 7, so that's just a plain failed momentum attempt. So we're going to swing back over the Morian side to pick a level 3 initiative leader. Okay, jumping in here to correct a few mistakes from earlier. So the first thing is I forgot to mark this javelin as missile no during shock combat. This one here, so I've done that. Also, this elephant unit on the Morian right here, they actually had their elephant screen do a return fire, and they're only allowed to do an entry reaction fire with those elephant screens. And that did result in a hit on this chariot, so I've removed that hit there. But the Morians are going to stay over there on that right side and pick this Nayaka elephant leader to activate next. Okay, over here on the right flank of the Morians, going to be activating this level 3 Nayaka leader here with the elephants. And he's got one job here. It's to swing around the edge and dislodge this enemy javelin unit so that both the guild and tribal chiefs are able to activate this turn. Now, during the shock engagement, there was the option for me to withdraw these leaders as these enemies approached. I didn't think to do that. Also, they were able to contribute their charisma to those rolls. But at this point, they'd be pretty ineffective if we were to activate them. They'd be unable to give orders. But the first thing we have to deal with here in moving this elephant is this chariot unit. And we're going to be showing an orderly withdraw here. So the orderly withdraw section of the rules has the enemy making that decision at a 2 hex range. So like right when this unit activates, the chariot would need to decide if it wants to withdraw. Now there is a rule in the elephant section Rule 10.16, which says that these chariots must orderly withdraw when an elephant moves adjacent. And so that would seem to allow this chariot to defer this orderly withdrawal decision, which would be a benefit for them. They would then just allow this elephant to move next to them before they then orderly withdraw. Also, they could technically then entry reaction fire and then do the withdrawal and do the withdrawal fire. And finally, elephant entering a zone of control would have to stop movement immediately. So they gain all these benefits. It doesn't feel too thematic to me. So I'm going to say that this chariot needs to decide to withdraw at 2 hexes away. Normally, the orderly withdrawal requires that you have a higher MA than the approaching unit, but there is an exception for chariots and elephants. The chariot is allowed to withdraw 1 hex. So we're going to go ahead and do that. We'll have them withdraw 1 hex here. So again, we're saying this unit's just activated. And so the first decision is this chariot deciding to withdraw 1 hex. So now we go through a few steps here. First, the chariot unit receives an immediate cohesion hit just for being a chariot. Then if they were approached from the rear or the flank, they would get another hit. They were not. They were approached from the front. And finally, we do a TQ check. And if the die roll is higher than the TQ, the unit receives an additional cohesion hit. Chariot rolls a 7 there, so that is 1 additional hit. And the other thing I should have actually done earlier here is these guys get to do a withdrawal fire. Mounted archers get to fire at the approaching unit at a range of 2 hexes. So let's do that now. And there's a +1 DRM there because the chariot is considered to be moving while they're withdrawing here. So that's a mounted archer at a range of 2 hexes, needing a 3 or less. But because they're moving, they need a 2 or less. And they get a 4, so that's a miss. So now this elephant can actually spend its first movement point. We'll just move them here. Again, we're going to swing them around the edge here. And again, they're now 2 hexes away from this chariot again. So we have to make that orderly withdrawal decision. And again, we're saying those chariots really want to avoid these elephants. They do not want to be in those zones of control. So they're going to go ahead and withdraw again. You get the automatic 1 hit for being a chariot, so up to 3. Not being approached from the flank or the rear, so they don't get the hit for that. And now the TQ check, and they get an 8. So that is enough to force them to rout. And of course, chariots are just automatically eliminated. So more route points for the Morians there. So now we're going to have this elephant complete its movement. It spent 1 of its movement points moving into this hex. It's now going to change facing for 2, 3, and then it'll go 4, 5 to approach this unit's flank. This javelin unit here, unable to do a reaction facing change because they are in the Zocs of enemy units. So now we're going to have this elephant fire its javelin at this unit. Okay, so mounted javelin needs a 3 or less at a range of 1 hex, but they move, so 2 or less. And they get a 5, so that's a miss. We will also get this marker placed here because we will be shock attacking this light infantry unit. And let's flip this elephant unit to moved. Okay, now we're going to get this elephant unit moving, and we're not going to be too aggressive with this guy. We're just going to have him swing up to this position here. So we'll have him do a 1, 2 to change facing, 3, 4, 5, 6 to change facing back. We'll get this unit flipped for having moved. Okay, now we're going to go into shock combat here. Starting with the first step there, the charge step. So we're going to roll, do a TQ check for each unit there. So first the elephant, and we get a 5 there, so he is fine. And now we'll do the light infantry, and because the attacker is an elephant here, we have to add 1 to the defender's die roll. So we get a 6, have to add 1 to 7, so that will be 1 hit on the defender. Okay, check for leader casualties, no leaders. Now we'll be resolving the shock. So clash of spears and swords chart, this is a flank attack. Attacker is an elephant, defender is a light imp. So that is going to be a base column of 13 there. We can see we have position superiority here. This elephant attacking the flank of the light infantry. So they are attack superior. We will be doubling the hits on the defender. We do not apply the size ratio difference here because it's an elephant versus a non-elephant. No terrain or leaders. And so we'll be rolling on the 13 column, and we get a 3 here. So that's going to be a 2, 4, but again, doubling the defender hits, 2, 8. Okay, push of shields breakthrough. No unit is 3 times higher than an enemy unit, surprisingly here, but not the case. And finally, we'll check for collapse. Obviously, this Nanda unit will be routing, and the elephant unit will be moving into their vacated hex. And you'll notice the elephant is 1 away from breaking, and we saw earlier that there's cases where you have to roll to see if they'll break or stand, but in this case, he will not be in an enemy zone of control, so he doesn't have to make that roll. So let's get this unit routed. And we'll advance into the vacated hex. And we're not going to bother with changing facing 1 vertex. We may plan next turn to have these elephants continue this direction toward the Nanda units. Okay, so that's going to do it for this leader here. Objective completed. We were able to free up these 2 chiefs here to activate this turn. So we'll get them flipped to finished. Okay, back to the Nandas, and they're going to choose their left flank Nayaka Cav Commander. All right, and our plan with these guys here will be to just get them swung around the edge here, and hopefully we can get a momentum roll and try to engage with the flank and rear of this elephant unit and maybe get around the edge here to re-lock up these two leaders here. So let's see how that goes. So we'll start by getting this inside unit here moving first, and we're just going to bring them up in a position to hopefully get momentum and then engage with this elephant unit. And then we'll get this unit moved up next to him. Okay, now we're going to tip momentum roll for the Nyaka leader. And they get a 2 there, so they are able to activate again, but we have to decide, are we going to trump in with a higher rated leader on the Mauryan side? Okay, so we are going to attempt to trump the momentum roll there with Chanakya, and we'll have to roll his initiative rating or less. And he rolls a 9 here, so pretty big failure there for Chanakya. He's actually going to have to be marked as finished here. And the Nyaka Cav commander here will start another activation. And so these Cav here are going to move again, but they've already moved, so they each need to take 1 cohesion hit. Pretty big momentum here for the Nyaka, and of course the failure by Chanakya to trump in means this Nyaka can really disrupt things here on the Mauryan right. So first we're going to have this Cav unit engage here on the rear of the elephant and the tribal unit. So we're going to get them moved, swung around, and attacking from this direction. Okay, so now we can do reaction facing changes for these units. Now, in some of the other games in the series, you actually have to factor in the difference in MA here when you do this facing change. That's not actually called out in the rules, but it is in the charts. And so I will actually apply that here. We'll have the elephant change facing 1 vertex just to make it a flank instead of a rear attack. Before we move on, we're actually going to have this Nyaka leader do an orderly withdrawal away from this elephant unit. We're going to say that when this light Cav approached, this leader was able to withdraw 1 hex away from it. And that will just free this leader up to issue orders to this other elephant in a future turn. They won't be locked in the Zoc of this unit. And now we'll have this elephant change facing. And now they have to roll a die, adding 1 to the roll because this unit's MA is 8 and their MA is 7. So they roll a 3, add 1 to a 4. And so no effect there. Now this javelin unit is going to fire its javelins at the elephant unit. Mounted javelin needs a 3 or less, but they move, so 2 or less. And they get a 4, so that's a miss. And we're going to get this next light Cav moving up, and we're going to have them actually position themselves in the rear of both of these chiefs. And again, before I forget, putting these must shock markers out. We're making the decision to shock. And I'm just going to get these markers visible. Okay, here we are, and I have of course, the markers and the leaders splayed out here pointing to the relevant units. And we could do a reaction facing change here, but there's a pretty big difference in MA, and these units both have poor troop quality, so they could very well route from the reaction facing change roll, so we're just going to skip that. Okay, so I'm just jumping around here. I have some of the markers splayed out, but we're going to say that just like this elephant Nyaka leader was able to withdraw, we're going to say that both the guild and tribal chief also did an orderly withdrawal. I'm going to say these leaders are now in the hexes in front of the unit, so they are covered by those cohesion hits at the moment. So the leaders are not stacked with these 2 units. But we'll have this Cav fire its javelin at the guild unit here. Again, needs a 2 or less there, and he gets a 6, so that's a miss. Okay, so now we'll move into the shock combat phase. So first thing, we have this light Cav here who will be attacking both of these LI. And then we have this light Cav who will be attacking the LI and the elephant. And so the first thing we have to do is determine which of the defending units will be used when we determine the base column and the angle of attack. So for this combat, they're going to choose the elephant. And here we'll choose the tribal LI. I don't think this one matters as much, both LI and both rear. So first we'll do the charge step. So TQ checks for everyone here and no modifiers to apply. So we'll start with the elephant unit, and he gets a 1, so he's good. So on to the Cav. And 4, so he's good. Then the LI here, and that's a 0, so they're good as well. So we'll move on to the light Cav here, and he gets a 0, so good. We'll get this guild LI. That's a 5, so that's 1 hit. And the tribal LI, and they get a 9, so that is pretty huge. That's going to be 5 more hits. And again, during that pre-shock step, we do actually route those units that have exceeded troop quality. So this unit will be routing, and they'll just head right back to this hex here. So I'll turn around and go 1, 2. And of course, this unit will not advance here, still in the middle of shock combat with the other unit. So we'll move on to the next step. Check for leader casualties. We do have the Nyaka leader here, so we'll roll 1 die for them. And it's just a 5, so no issue. On to the resolve the shock step. So this one, we've determined the elephant will be used for determining base column and angle of attack. And light Cav on the flank of an elephant is base column of 5. And there's a note that Cav cannot be position superior against elephants, so no position superiority. And again, no size ratio difference because there's an elephant involved in combat with a non-elephant. No terrain adjustments, but we do have a leader. So the attacking side has a charisma of 1. They will be adding 1 to the die roll. And so we'll roll on the 5 column and we get a 9 there. So can't add 1 to that, but that is a 2-3. So 2 hits on the attacker, 3 hits on the defender. Okay, push of shields. No unit is 3 times higher than an enemy. So we'll move on to the resolve the shock for this engagement. So light cav, rear attack on a light infantry is a base column of 6. And they will get position superiority here, a rear attack. So they'll get to double the hits on the defender. Size ratio difference, we have a 4 to 5. But again, this unit moves, so we round in their favor. So that's 1 to 1. No column shifts. No terrain or leader adjustments. And so we'll roll on the 6 column. It's a 4. So it's 2 and 2, but doubling the hits means 2 and 4. Nothing to do for a push of shields, so we'll move on to the check for collapse step. We'll start here on this side. Obviously, this unit will be routing. They cannot route into this hex because that is a zone of control. They could potentially route into this unit here, but then they would have to move into this zone of control. So they're going to route basically through this hex and attempt to go around here. So this unit will go 1, 2. And the route movement's a little bit tricky to get the hang of in this game, so I may have needed to do something else there, but I think that's the only path where they can actually move the full 2 hexes there. So we'll just leave them there. And this unit here will now advance after combat. Again, moving adjacent to an enemy leader, that leader immediately does an orderly withdrawal. They're just going to hop up with the routed unit here. Okay, before we forget, I'm also going to mark both of these javelin units here as missile no, because they're involved in shock combat. Some of the other games in the series, I thought it was only foot javelin, but this just says all javelin unit. Okay, check for collapse step here, and we just have this one unit who is within 1 of breaking and still in an enemy's lock, so they have to do the TQ check. And they get a 6, so that is going to break this unit, so they're also going to route. And they'll just route, I know it's a little bit messy here, but they'll just route to this hex here. They'll turn around and go 1, 2. Okay, the cav will advance into this hex. And this time we will change facing 1 vertex. And again, this tribal chief here, when this light cav advanced 1 hex away from a leader, they get to automatically orderly withdraw. So we'll just move them here. And that is going to do it. We'll get these markers cleaned up, and then I'll get this leader marked as finished. And then we're going to move back to the Morian side for the next level 3 initiative leader. Okay, the Morians are going to go over to their right flank and activate this level 3 initiative tribal chief. Okay, so this tribal chief got to this position after a couple orderly withdrawals when these Nandan Cav advanced. But now his objective will be to try to get at least one of his tribal units rallied here. We can see here this unit is in the range and line of sight of this enemy unit, so they will not be able to rally. So we'll focus on rallying this unit here. And tribal chiefs only able to move 6 MA, but we should still be able to move around and get stacked with this unit so we can do the automatic rally. So we'll get that going here. So 1, 2, no issue moving through another leader here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So second order will be to do a rally here. And again, since we're stacked with this unit, don't need to roll for that. It's an automatic success. Flipping the marker here to rallied. And the unit gets half of their TQ rounded up in cohesion hits. So that's going to be 2. Okay, this tribal chief does have 1 additional order, but they actually can't attempt to rally this unit. So they are going to be done. We'll get them flipped and move back to the Nanda side. Okay, so the Nanda's down to just their last leader that can activate. Of course, it's Donna here on the right flank. Okay, so instead of moving these cav, we're going to have Donna move over to this position to help deal with this guild. These 2 guild units here are both routed, and this guild chief is yet to activate. So very likely on their turn, they can just go rally both of these units. We have Donna spend his first order here, moving himself right up here with this routed unit. Now, he can't actually rally this unit because it is within the line of sight and range of this enemy archer, but he does have 2 orders remaining. He's going to spend the first one giving another order to this chariot unit. You can see this chariot with just 4 troop quality and 2 hits, so they may be close to breaking. Of course, they eliminate when they break, so we're going to try to get a little more use out of them. We're going to activate them again, have them start by firing at this unit next to them, and then they will move into position to attempt to eliminate this routed unit. So they need to take another hit because we will be moving them again. Now they're going to fire at this unit next to them. Okay, mounted archer at a range of 1 hex, but who will move, so they do have to apply that DRM, so they need a 4 or less, and they get a 0, so that is a hit. And they also are now missile no. And now we'll have this chariot move into this hex and put down the must shock. Okay, 1 order left for Donna. We're going to have him activate this unit here, another chariot, And now they can fire at this unit on the edge here. Mounted archer at a range of 2 hexes who move needs a 2 or less. Gets a 3 and misses. They go to missile no. They've also spent 2 of their 7 movement points. They'll spend 2 more changing facing here. They've spent 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 to change facing. 5, 6. Also remember they've already moved here, so they do have to take that hit for moving a second time. And they also need one of these markers. Okay, so that is Donna's third order. So we're going to move into the shock segment now for these 2 units. And so first step is that charge step, which may actually eliminate these routed units. Each one will be rolling there, the TQ check, and their TQ, remember, since they're routed, is just 1. So anything over that and they will actually be eliminated. Remember, chariots do not have to make this TQ check, but also both defenders are routed, so any attacking unit here would get to skip this check. All right, rolled for both units there, and I got a 2 TQ check here, 6 TQ check there, both of them eliminated. So we get our first route points here for the Nandas, and then these 2 chariot units here will both get to advance into the vacated hexes. And we'll have this chariot unit here actually change facing when they advance, so they'll advance and then change facing to forward. And because both of these chariots have kind of moved away from their main line, I'll just drop this move marker. Okay, so we're actually going to have Donna try to roll for momentum here, and he gets an 8. That's going to do it for Donna. I'll get him flipped. All right, the Mornings are going to activate this level 3 initiative guild chief on their right flank. Okay, so as a reminder, this guild chief, much like the tribal chief, was forced to orderly withdraw a couple times after that Nandan cav attack. And they're currently stacked here with a routed unit of theirs, which they will be unable to rally because technically this unit is adjacent to an enemy unit, even though it's a routed unit. So their plan is to swing around the edge here and attempt to rally this unit, and then attempt to get one of these 2 units moving forward to engage with one of the Nandans. So we'll start with just the move around the edge there. So we moved into this position here. We're going to attempt a rally here. So in order to rally this unit, we have to roll our initiative +1 or lower. And he rolls an 8 there, so fails the rally. And so since that 8 is also higher than the troop quality of the unit, it's just eliminated. So not a great start there, but so he has 1 order left. He's going to actually get this unit moving, this LI. So 1, 2, 3. And we'll just get these markers visible for this cav here. And this cav is going to do an orderly withdrawal here. So the difference in MA is 3. They get to move 3 hexes away from this unit. So first they're going to get a hit here for being approached from the flank. And then they're going to move 1, 2, 3 hexes. The final step of that orderly withdrawal, they got to roll a die. If it's higher than their TQ, they have to take an additional hit. And it's a 0, so no additional hit there. And this LI, having spent 3 MA, will move 1 additional hex here, and then we'll just change facing 1. We'll mark them moved. There is this guild chief unit here who could shock attack, but they are out of the command range of this guild chief. We'll see that both of these are enemy zones of control for this chariot. Also here for this chariot. And this is an enemy light cav here. So the command range is, of course, blocked through that enemy unit, and this is an enemy zone of control as well. So their range does not reach this unit to allow them to shock attack. So we're going to flip the guild chief to finished and move over to the next leader. We're going to stay over here on the Morian side and swing over to the left flank there to activate this Nyaka elephant leader. And we're just going to have these elephants aim to push these cav back and get them kind of out of contention. We know that their leader, Donna, has moved over to this position. So that might at least take a turn or so to get them back into the mix. Also, these elephants don't have a whole lot to do if they move inward here. There's no one to really attack there. We do have this routed unit here, but we'll aim to have this guild chief take care of them. So we'll start with moving this inside elephant unit first. We'll go 1, 2, 3, 4. Now they're within 2 hexes of these cav. The cav will be withdrawing here. And there are a few different steps to that withdrawal, but the only one that applies to these cav being approached from the front is just that TQ check at the end of the withdrawal. So a difference in MA of 1 here, so they can move back 1 hex each. They each have to do the TQ check. We get a 6 for this Lancer, and we get a 4 for this one, so no hits. If they'd rolled higher than their TQ there, they would have had to take 1 hit. And now I'll just speed up the rolls and the withdrawals and come back to you in a minute. Okay, so this is how this first elephant's move ends, and all of these cav each getting 1 hit through that sequence of orderly withdrawals. We'll now mark this elephant as moved, and we'll move this elephant up right next to this unit. And when they get to this position 2 hexes away, this light cav will withdraw, and they do fail the TQ check there, so another hit on them. And we'll get this elephant marked as moved, and the leader flipped to finished, and that'll do it. Okay, so on to the level 4 initiative leaders, and there is just one on the map. It's, of course, this guild chief on the Morian left. And I've already moved these markers out to make things visible, but this guild chief here has an initiative of 4 and just 3 units left on the map here. And so he's going to have the unit he's stacked with move up to attempt to eliminate this routed unit here. He's going to have this javelin unit swing around and try to do a rear attack on this unit next to him. Got a command range of 5 here, so he'll issue an order to this guild unit. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we'll get these units moving. And we're going to have Donna do the orderly withdrawal. We know when an enemy unit approaches, the leader can withdraw, leaving the unit there. So they'll just withdraw 1 hex. And now we'll have this archer unit fire, a moving foot archer at a range of 1 hex, 4 or less, and gets a 6, so that's a miss. We'll mark this unit moved, and we will add this shock marker here. We're actually going to have this unit move, but I'm going to say they moved first, because technically they're now out of the command range of the guild chief. And this chariot will not be withdrawing or doing a reaction facing change. They are just 1 hit away from breaking. And so they're not going to take the risk there. So this unit, no missiles, but we do have to put the shock marker there. So 2 of the guild units have moved now. We'll move this last unit, and they're kind of going to do this little U-turn here. We'll mark them moved. Get these markers cleaned up. I know things are a little messy here, but we also need to obviously put this marker down here. Okay, the guild chief does have 1 additional order to give, but they do not have any other units to move. So we'll move into the shock segment now. We'll start here with a pre-shock check. Again, a unit attacking a routed unit does not need to do that charge pre-shock TQ check, but the routed unit does. And they get a 3, so that will eliminate this unit. And the attacker will advance into the vacated hex here. And again, this leader can withdraw from the adjacent enemy unit here. Okay, doing the charge rolls for this LI here. 4, no issue. We'll do it for this unit. And they get an 8 there. That is 4 hits. So obviously the attacker will need to route here, and the most direct path there is probably to go 1, 2. Okay, pre-shock check for this LI unit here. That's going to be a 9 there, so 5 hits here. And now the chariot will do the pre-shock or charge roll here, and attacking chariots, will remember, do not need to make this check, but defending chariots do. And they get a 2, so they're fine. And another attacking unit here will need to route. So a pretty poor showing here by this guild chief. 2 attackers routed, and they cannot roll for momentum, so that is actually going to do it for them. I'll get these markers cleaned up and get this leader finished. Okay, we are on to our level 5 initiative leader. Of course, that is Chandragupta. And before we get started with him, just another quick mistake to correct. These 2 elephant units here were both involved in shock combat. Both have javelins, and so they're both missile no. Now, they still have their elephant screens, but they are missile no on the javelins. We're going to try to get these calves swinging around to the right here. These infantry, we could try to get moving forward and engaging, but there's some units over here that are closer to breaking. So I'd like to try to take advantage of that first. So all 4 of these cav will move here, and Chandra will move himself. He's got 5 orders, all of these units in range. We'll start with this unit first. And we're going to try to get Chandra moved to this hex here. That's going to put him within 6 hexes of this elephant unit. And if he can get a momentum roll, he'll be able to activate this elephant to turn around and try to get one of these routed units eliminated here. And we'll get these units flipped to moved. And Chandra going to roll for momentum now. And he gets a 6 here. So fails the momentum roll. We'll get him marked finished. And again, that is going to end the turn there. Chanakya, we remember, failed a trump attempt earlier, so he's already finished. So we'll move into the end of turn steps. Okay, we're into the end of turn steps here. So the route and recovery phase, first step there to remove the rallied markers. And we'll just zoom in here over to the Nanda left flank just to show a couple examples. So first step there, remove rallied markers. We remember this tribal chief here was able to rally one of their units, so we just simply remove that marker. I don't recall if we rallied any others, but I'll check and remove those markers as well. And then we would move on to the route movement. And just as an example of that, this unit routed here with a movement of 5. They just moved their full movement. So I'll go ahead and do that route movement across the map now. I'll take care of that off camera and then come back to you. Okay, so this is how things are looking after the route movement and the removal of the rallied markers. There was just that 1 rallied marker. And then we would check for tribal flight. And just to recap those rules, we would go through each guild, aka Sreni, and each tribe. And if they have at least 1 routed or eliminated unit, and you roll a die and add the number of routed and eliminated units to it, if it's greater than the flight level specified in the scenario, then the tribe or the guild will flee the battle. And I've done that roll here for the 3 relevant groups here on the map. And the Artisan Guild has failed that roll. Of course, they had that poor attack earlier. The Pataliputra tribe has also failed that roll, but the Weaver Guild succeeded with that roll, so they will stick around for next turn. So then we would move on to the reload segment and then flip all the moved units and the leaders back to their front sides. I'll do all that off camera and then be right back. Okay, here we are, and we've taken care of all those missile reloads, we've gotten all the units and leaders flipped back to their front sides, and we've removed the tribes and guilds that have fled. Okay, and if we move into the withdrawal phase, we'll take a look at the current route point total for each side. We've got the Morians with all guild and tribe units here, but those totaling 21 route points. Each guild unit worth 2 route points, the guild leader worth their initiative, and then the tribe unit's worth 1 route point and its leader worth their initiative. So they are 35% of the way to their 60 route point withdrawal level. And the Nanda's down here with 16 route points. It's going to be troop quality for those chariots and 1/2 of troop quality rounded up for the light infantry. And that puts them at 23% of their 70 route point withdrawal level. So that is going to conclude turn 2.